from Galilee. A love story by Marjorie Holmes.
This is the 13th in our series of readings from the book Two from Galilee. This is an edited version of the book, written by Marjorie Holmes and published by Fleming A. Travell Company. We're coming close to the end of chapter 9, and last time we heard Mary tell Joseph about this miracle that occurred. But Joseph was doubtful, and he thought certainly there must be another man involved. Mary had already told her parents. They had a difficult time believing, but her father, as usual, knew that Mary would tell the truth. So Mary's now trying to convince Joseph that this is truly God's child that's within her. We're going to listen now to more of Joseph's reaction as we continue in our series of readings from the book Two from Galilee by Marjorie Holmes. Her tears dissolved him, so that his own eyes were dim as he folded her quietly against him, stroking her hair with his long, work-scarred hands. "Hush, hush, little Mary. I love you, and as long as I live, no harm shall come to you." Thus he gentled her, while his own soul threshed and strove against the invading spear. Presently, when she lay still against his heart, he asked her, "What does your mother say of this?" "Oh, my mother is frantic. She can't believe it. Forgive me, my beloved, but she fears that it's your child that I carry." He moaned again, through clenched teeth. "She wants me to go away for a while, to visit my Aunt Elizabeth at that little town near Jerusalem. She thinks it may be very well a mistake, that I am simply overwrought, that perhaps if I rest a while, then—" "And what does your father say?" Joseph asked. "Joachim believes," she told him. "He doesn't question my story. To appease my mother, he's agreed that I make the journey, but he knows that what I've said is true. The time is upon us. The Christ is surely coming, and I, his daughter, am to bear the holy child that's to be our deliverer and Savior." Later that night, Joseph reeled through the darkness. He carried no torch, and when an approaching light threw trees and doorsteps into grotesque shapes, he turned and plunged into the sheltering bowels of a dark little alleys that would hide him in his blind agony. He had been composed when he parted with Mary. He had walked erect, carefully, like a man determined not to reveal his emotions. But once out of sight, he staggered, stumbled, not caring whether or not he fell, longing to fall and hurt himself in some manner so monstrous that he could feel no more pain. For the spear now ripped and bore viciously deeper, burning and tearing. "I can't stand it," he thought. "I can't stand it." Joseph groped home into the dark little shop. Crouching, he fumbled around. A loose plank came crashing down upon his foot, and for an instant he sickened before the astounding physical pain. "Joseph?" There was stirring behind the drapery. He saw a small eye of light approaching. His mother stood in the doorway, her hair in a thick braid, a saucer of oil in hand. "Joseph, is that you?" "Yes, Mother, it's only me. Go back to bed." "Where have you been?" she said. "It's very late, you know." "Mother, am I a child that you should lie awake counting the hours until I come in?" He arose guiltily, trying not to wince at the excruciating hurting of his flesh. "A child? Well, a child is a child to his mother until the day of his marriage," Timna said. "Surely you haven't been with Mary until this hour?" "No, I've been walking." He turned his head aside as his mother drew nearer with her lifted lamp. He realized that he must be dirty and disheveled. He had crashed against bushes and trees in his wandering, and said, "I didn't feel like sleeping. I've been walking in the hills." "It's dangerous to go about so at night," his mother said, troubled. "Joseph, is something wrong? Did you and Mary quarrel?" "No, now please, Mother, go back to bed." "My son, I can see there's something wrong. Is Mary angry with you? Is that it?" "No, she's tired, that's all. She's going to go away for a little while." His own words startled him, as they also startled his mother. Until this moment he had scarcely comprehended this facet of all that Mary had told him. "Going away," Timna said, setting down the lamp. "Within 3 months of your wedding?" "Yes," he said hastily. "Her parents think it's best. She's going to visit an aunt in Judah, in a little town called Ein Karim. I think that's what she said. It's somewhere near Jerusalem." "But why? With all the preparations, I'd think she'd be needed here." "Joseph, tell me." She came nearer, and her gentle, frank blue eyes searched his. "You haven't done anything to offend her. As her betrothed husband, surely you've treated her with respect." She regretted the words at once, so great was the anguish that came to her son's face. "Of course, Mother, how can you ask such a thing?" "I'm sorry. Forgive me." She flung the braid back from her shoulder. Quietly she wiped a bit of spilled oil from the base of the lamp. He was right. How could she? He was a grown man now. He was not a child to be questioned by his mother. She was ashamed of her wakefulness and her lack of discretion. It's just I can't see why in the world Mary would want to leave you at such a time, or why her parents should let her go." "They think it's been too much for her," he said. "All the preparations. They think she needs a rest." Then he said an astonishing thing. "You mustn't think evil of her, Mother." "Think evil?" Timna gasped. "Of Mary? Oh, son, no. That's the last thing I'd think." In her dismay, she bade him good night and hastened back to her pallet. But now that he had planted a seed, she could not rest. What was going on? One unspeakable mystery was stirring. Or was she only imagining things? Yet Joseph had been highly agitated. Something was indeed wrong, or Mary would not even consider such a departure. A woman betrothed within a few months of her wedding? The humiliation to her espoused husband, to all of them. It simply wasn't like Mary. No, this must be Hannah's doing. But why? And then, against her will, yet unable to deny it altogether, the question assaulted her. Mary, the pure, the exquisite, the pride of her parents. Could it be that she was in the most serious trouble that could befall a girl? Yet if it involved Joseph, the problem could scarcely be considered that serious. In her confoundment, Timna sat upright. But if indeed her son had no part in it, what then? Chapter 10. Hannah plunged into the work of preparing Mary for the journey. It seemed to her that by drowning herself in action, she could somehow deny it, this madness that had come upon her child. The thing now was to get Mary out of the village, away from Joseph, away from prying eyes and busy tongues. In case, just in case, let Mary visit her Aunt Elizabeth for a while. Let Elizabeth shelter her and counsel her and nurse her, if need be, back to sanity. Elizabeth was older and wiser, despite the fact that she'd never borne a child. Let her learn what it was like to worry about one. Children were not an unmixed blessing. Hannah had always felt close to her beautiful older sister, and when the priest Zechariah carried her off to Jerusalem, she had begged to go along. Mingled with her awed respect for Elizabeth was a trace of envy for the more graceful life she led. Yet always there had been the consolation that it was Hannah's narrow loins that had found favor, and not Elizabeth's, in the sight of God. Well now, Hannah's mouth tightened. How much favor she had actually found remained to be seen. In any case, Elizabeth would offer shelter for the poor, confused Mary for a time, and a period of respite for the rest of them. On the day Mary left, Hannah did not go to the crossroads with them. She awoke with a headache so severe she could scarcely raise her head. Mary had to tell her goodbye in the dim little room with its heavy odor of sleep, laced with the sharp taint of vinegar. Her heart broke at the tiny shape huddled on the mattress. "Mother, it grieves me to leave you so." She knelt, helpless before this force that was sweeping them all before it so relentlessly. "I'll stay if you'll only say the word. I want to help you. I want to be near you always." "Mother." She remained so, gazing down, eyes moist. Oh, embrace me, she thought. Tell me you'll miss me. You're concerned for me. There was no response, though. Her mother stared forlornly out the window a minute as the enormity of it bore in on her. Her voice was little and lost, saying, I've never been away from home before, Mother. Hannah forced herself to rise up on her elbows. Though the room rocked and her daughter's face in its veil was a blur. We've been through all that, she said. Now go now. Don't keep your father waiting. If you should miss this meeting, no telling when you could leave. Mary rose, swallowing against the hurt in her throat. You mustn't worry about me, Mother, she said from the door. I'll be quite safe, and I'll give your love to Elizabeth. Yes, you'll be better off there with her. She's wise. Sometimes women who don't have children are wiser about them than those who do, said Hannah, and her words compounded the irony. Mary stood torn. As yet, she had not had the courage to tell anyone of that other revelation. Dare I? She wondered. But no, they'd truly think her mad in claiming that Elizabeth too was to bear a child, as the angel told her. Credulity had already been strained beyond the breaking point. And now? Goodbye, Mother, she said softly, still hoping. Goodbye. Hannah's face was already to the wall. Hannah lay still until Mary's footsteps had receded, until she could hear voices and the crunch of hooves and feet on the street below no more. Then, when all was silent, Hannah gave way. She flung her tight-clenched limbs wide. She tossed her pain-lashed head. Her teeth were bared like those of an animal, and from her throat came a choked and bitter cry, its anguish the more awful because she must muffle its sound so that the other children might not hear. Mary! Mary! On the trip, they allowed Esau to walk along, leading the donkey, hobbling cheerfully through the darkness, feeling his way, as indeed they were all groping along, feeling their way no less than he. They kept to the back streets as much as possible, but encountered a number of people even so, among them Cousin Deborah. "I just heard," she exclaimed. "Oh, take me with you. What I wouldn't give to get away from all this hustle myself. Sometimes I think I can't stand it. I keep telling my mother that—" She fell into step with them, babbling enthusiastically, while her excited eyes and cool, narrow nose seemed to sniff at the scent of truth. She caught Mary's wrist, holding her a little back from her father. "I don't know whether to envy you or be angry with you. You will be back in time for my wedding, won't you?" Oh, yes. I wouldn't miss it," said Mary. "Or your own." Joachim called curtly over his shoulder. "Come now. Hurry if we're going to make our rendezvous." His tone signaled Mary's dismissal from Deborah. She had to stand watching them trudge on, with their strange and secret air of urgency. Certainly there was about them no air of holiday. Mad with curiosity, yet feeling that old bond of affection and loyalty for Mary, Deborah hurried home, debating whether or not to tell her parents. Out in the open country, they freed Esau's hand and let him bounce along, leading the donkey and echoing the bird calls in the trees. He knew them all by name and could echo their cries. The day was bright and hot, with the rich, sweet fragrance of flowering ginger, almond, and lemon blossoms. For Mary, every step was torment. She could hardly bear to think of her mother, or Joseph. He had not returned to her since that night in the olive grove, and it was his father who made these arrangements. Perhaps then his people, even his people, were anxious to be rid of her. And so we end as Mary's getting ready to go visit her Aunt Elizabeth. We'll continue next time with more from the book Two from Galilee.